Xi artifact underscore ID equals 86812969 B793 B64872. Artifact underscore ID equals 6277045 75746F15. Title equals YouTube voiceover script at MD. Content type equals text/markdown. You ever feel like you're just a ghost in your own life, slinking through the cracks, hoping nobody notices you? That was me, Lucas Reed, back in junior year at Jefferson High, a sprawling brick-and-mortar cage in the heart of suburban Ohio. I wasn't the kid who got picked last in gym. I was the kid nobody saw at all, until they wanted a target. It started small, like it always does, a shoulder check in the hall, my books accidentally knocked to the floor, a snicker that followed me like a shadow. By 16, I'd learned to keep my head down, move quick, blend into the noise of the cafeteria or the blur of the locker-lined corridors. But no matter how invisible I tried to be, Jake Palmer and his crew Derek and Cody always found me. Jake, the king of the hallway with his sharp grin and sharper words, had this way of making you feel like you owed him your dignity just for existing. Derek was the muscle, all smirks and shoves, while Cody, wiry and mean, had a laugh that cut like glass. They called it keeping the order at Jefferson High. I called it my daily hell. The worst was the stretch between history class and lunch, a narrow hallway they nicknamed the Grinder. I'd time it just right, wait for the crowd to thicken so I could slip through, but one rainy Tuesday, I miscalculated. "Yo, Reed." Jake's voice sliced through the chatter. "You forget your hall pass or just your spine?" Derek yanked my backpack, spilling my notes across the wet tile, and Cody kicked my chem book down the hall, pages flapping like a dying bird. The crowd laughed, phones out, recording my humiliation like it was Tuesday's entertainment. I knelt, scooping up papers, my face burning, telling myself to stay quiet, to not give them the satisfaction. But deep down, something was starting to simmer, a spark of enough is enough I didn't even know I had. I didn't see the guy in the corner of the cafeteria that day. Nobody did. He was just some dude in a faded denim jacket, tinkering with the soda machine, his broad shoulders hunched like he was part of the furniture. But his eyes, man, they were sharp, catching everything. Jake's taunts, the way my shoulders stiffened, the split second I locked eyes with Jake and didn't look away. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that tiny flicker of defiance caught his attention. His name was Cal, a former roughneck who'd traded bar fights for fixing machines, but he still had ties to an old crew, guys who rode iron horses and wore leather like armor. That night, he made a call to an old friend, Vince, a biker with a beard like steel wool and a heart that remembered what it was like to be the underdog. "Found a kid," Cal said, voice low. "He's taking hits, but he's got fight in him. You in?" Vince didn't hesitate. "Where and when?" The next week, I started noticing weird things. A black Harley parked across from the school, its rider leaning against it, watching the crowd with eyes that didn't miss a thing. He'd show up at random, never close enough to spook anyone, just there. I caught Jake glancing his way once, his usual smirk faltering, like he sensed the air shifting. I didn't know who the guy was. Hell, I thought he might be a cop or some creep, but something about his presence made my chest feel a little less tight. In a garage on the edge of town, Vince was laying it out for his crew, a half-dozen Hell's Reapers, their leather cuts patched with skulls and flames. "This ain't about throwing punches," he told them, ash falling from his cigarette into an old coffee can. "It's about showing up, letting those punks know someone's watching." He didn't need to explain why. Most of them had been kids like me once, scrappy and overlooked, fighting battles nobody else saw. The bullies didn't stop, not right away. Jake still leaned into my space at lunch, snatching fries off my tray, his breath hot with spearmint and smugness. "What's it feel like, Lucas, knowing nobody's got your back?" he'd say, his crew chuckling like trained dogs. But one day, I didn't look down. I held his gaze, just for a second, and said, "You sure about that?" It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Derek pause mid-laugh, and Jake's grin twitched like he'd tasted something sour. That same day, Jake found a Polaroid of a Harley lineup slipped into his locker, no note, just chrome gleaming under a streetlight. Cody got one in his gym bag, Derek in his math book. They laughed it off, but it was a nervous laugh, the kind that knows trouble circling. By Friday, whispers were everywhere. Kids said they'd seen bikes near the football field, heard engines growling after dark. I kept my head down, but I felt it a weird kind of safety, like someone had my back even if I didn't know who. Then came Monday, cold and crisp, the kind of morning where your breath hangs in the air. I was halfway to the school gates when I heard a low rumble, like thunder rolling in slow. Heads turned, phones came out, and there they were, 10 Harleys, riding tight, chrome flashing like a warning. Vince led the pack, his leather cut worn but proud, his eyes locked on the school like he owned it. They didn't speed, didn't rev, they just rolled in, deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. Jake and his crew were by the entrance, mid-taunt, when they froze. Derek's mouth hung open, Cody's hands twitched, and Jake looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. Vince swung off his bike, boots heavy on the pavement, and walked straight to me. "Morning, kid," he said, tossing me a helmet. I blinked, confused. "I don't ride." He grinned, just a little. "Today you do." The other bikers dismounted, forming a loose half-circle around me, not threatening, just there. No words, no fists, just presence, the kind that says, "We see you, and you're not alone." We walked toward the school, me in the middle, their boots echoing like a drumline. Jake tried to play it cool, muttering something to Derek, but his eyes were darting, searching for an escape. For the first time, I caught his gaze and didn't look away. I saw a doubt, maybe even fear. We walked through the courtyard, past the lockers, right to the main hall. Vince leaned down. "We'll be here when you're done. You don't walk out alone anymore." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. It wasn't just about safety, it was about being seen, really seen, for the first time in years. Lunch that day was different. Jake strutted in, trying to hold on to his kingpin vibe, but his shoulders were stiff, his jokes quieter. I sat at my usual corner table, tray untouched, expecting the usual. But when Jake passed by, he didn't stop, didn't grab my food, didn't say a word. Vince was in the doorway, arms crossed, his gaze like a laser on Jake's table. The silence was louder than any taunt. Jake muttered something, grabbed his tray, and left, his crew trailing like scolded dogs. I didn't smile, didn't cheer, but inside, something heavy started to lift. When the final bell rang, the bikes were still there, lined up along the curb, chrome glinting in the afternoon sun. Vince gave me a nod, a single pat on the shoulder. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "Better than I've been in a long time." They rolled out, no fanfare, just a steady rumble fading into the distance. Jake and his crew slunk off the other way, quieter than I'd ever seen them. I stood there, the smell of exhaust still in the air, knowing something had changed for good. Things didn't turn perfect overnight, life's not a movie. But the hallway wasn't a grinder anymore. Jake still glanced my way sometimes, but the shoves, the insults, they were gone. Kids who'd ignored me started nodding in the halls. A few even sat with me at lunch. I never found out exactly why the Reapers showed up. Maybe Cal knew my dad from way back. Maybe Vince just saw himself in me. Didn't matter. One day, I found a note in my locker, just 3 words in blocky script: "You're not alone." I kept it in my pocket, a reminder that sometimes the roughest folks have the biggest hearts. So, what do you think? Was it justice, or just a show of force? Could a bunch of bikers really turn the tide? Or was it me finally standing up that made the difference? Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and share your take. Have you ever seen someone unexpected step up when it mattered most? Hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss another story about the underdogs, the fighters, and the ones who ride in when you least expect it. Because sometimes, the loudest roar comes from the people who've got your back.